Chapter 1. Crossing into the game, the suspicion of a substitute. The night enveloped the city and the street lights emitted a dim halo. Scarlett huddled in the sofa of her small, dim apartment, surrounded by messy books and takeout boxes. She held a half-eaten, somewhat cold pizza in her left hand, and flipped through a romance novel she had just found from a used bookstore with her right hand. This novel tells the story of an ordinary girl who accidentally became a substitute for a rich man's deceased white moonlight. The plot is old-fashioned and bloody. Scarlett couldn't help but complain while reading, frowning slightly, with a hint of sarcasm at the corner of her mouth. What is this about? How could such a thing happen in reality? It's just a trick to deceive a little girl. Before she finished speaking, a dazzling and almost weird light suddenly flashed outside the window, like a sharp blade cutting through the night sky. Then a deafening thunder exploded in her ears. Scarlett's eyes went black, her head was dizzy, and then she lost consciousness. After an unknown amount of time, Scarlett slowly woke up. She felt like she was lying on an incredibly soft bed, as if she was wrapped in clouds. She opened her eyes dazedly and saw the exquisitely carved ceiling. A faint, unfamiliar fragrance filled the room. Scarlett widened her eyes in horror, quickly sat up, subconsciously grasped the quilt with both hands and looked around in panic. The room was filled with luxurious European-style furniture, each of which looked very valuable, and the large oil paintings hanging on the wall added a bit of mystery. "Where am I?" she murmured to herself, her voice trembling slightly with fear, and her throat was a little dry. Just then the door was pushed open with a creak. Alex walked in with steady strides. He was tall and strong, and his well-tailored high-end custom suit perfectly outlined his broad shoulders and upright posture. His hair was neatly combed back, revealing a smooth forehead. His deep eyes were like a deep pool in the cold night, cold and deep, chilling. Alex held his hands in front of his chest, and the muscles on his arms were faintly visible under his shirt. He looked down at Scarlett, who was sitting on the bed, and his thin lips parted slightly, and his tone was cold without a trace of warmth. "Awake? From today on you are Isabella's substitute, stay here." Scarlett heard this and widened her eyes, full of anger and disbelief. Her cheeks instantly turned red like a ripe tomato, and the veins on her forehead bulged slightly because of anger. She threw the blanket off her body, stood on the ground barefoot, and met Alex's cold eyes fearlessly. She clenched her fists tightly and her nails dug deep into her palms. "Who do you think I am? If you want a substitute, go find someone else. I am not a puppet at your mercy." Alex saw her resistance, frowned, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. He took a step forward, and the sense of oppression emanating from his body became stronger, like a volcano about to erupt. "You have no choice. No one dares to disobey my orders here." His voice was low and powerful with unquestionable majesty. Scarlett raised her head stubbornly, the veins on her neck bulged slightly. She looked straight into Alex's eyes, her eyes full of stubbornness and unyielding. "I won't. At worst I'll leave. Don't try to threaten me with such a ridiculous request. I'm not the kind of person who will bow to evil forces." Alex looked at her, a strange look flashed in his eyes, but soon returned to indifference. He narrowed his eyes slightly as if examining an object. "You can't leave, sign this contract, you can only stay here." As he said, he picked up a document from the table next to him and threw it on the bed with a pop, and the document slid a distance on the bed sheet before stopping. Scarlett didn't even look at the document, her eyes were filled with anger. She stretched out her hand and swung it hard, sweeping the document to the ground, and the paper was scattered all over the floor. "I won't sign it, don't dream. Do you think you can trap me with this method? Too naive." The two of them were in a stalemate, and the air in the room seemed to be ignited, filled with a strong smell of gunpowder. Alex saw Scarlett's firm attitude, and his expression became more gloomy. He stared at Scarlett closely as if he wanted to see through her. Finally, he snorted coldly, turned around and slammed the door, and the huge sound echoed in the room. Scarlett sat on the bed, gasping for breath, her chest heaving violently, and she was angry and panicked. At this time she caught a glimpse of an open magazine on the dressing table not far away. The cover said, "Business Weekly 20XX," and the date was exactly the same as the time in the romance novel. She was stunned at first. Then her eyes widened instantly as if she had thought of something, and an expression of disbelief appeared on her face. She quickly rushed over, grabbed the magazine and flipped through it. The contents were all the characters and events mentioned in the novel, as well as a detailed report on Alex's business empire. Scarlett's hands began to tremble uncontrollably, and the magazine slipped from her fingertips and fell to the ground. She slumped on the ground, holding her head with both hands, and her head buzzed. Did I really get into the book? How is this possible? Her voice was full of confusion and helplessness. The plot of the novel, which she had originally thought of as a boring pastime, has now become her real life, which made it difficult for her to accept it for a while. But when she thought of Alex's arrogant look just now, Scarlett gritted her teeth again, her eyes gradually became firm, and she swore secretly, "Since I have come, I will make the best of it. I am not the kind of person who will easily give up. I want to see if I can break this absurd plot in this world and live my own wonderful life." Chapter 2. Conflicts escalate and difficulties follow one after another. The morning after Scarlett refused to be a substitute, the sun shone through the gaps in the heavy curtains and sprinkled on the floor of the room. Before Scarlett could recover, a quick knock on the door suddenly sounded. Without waiting for her to respond, Olivia twisted her slender waist and walked in with a brisk but somewhat arrogant step. Olivia wore a well-cut slim dress today, and the hem of the dress swayed gently as she walked. Her carefully groomed curly hair fell softly on her shoulders, with slightly curled ends, which perfectly set off her fair face. The makeup on her face was delicate and elegant, but her bright big eyes flashed with ill intentions. With a fake smile on her lips, she walked straight to Scarlett, looking her up and down with disdain in her eyes, as if she was looking at a shabby, inferior item. "Oh, it seems that you haven't realized your situation yet," Olivia said, her voice tender but with sharp sarcasm. "Here, you'd better be obedient, otherwise you will suffer." Scarlett frowned, a trace of disgust flashed in her eyes. She straightened her back, stared back at Olivia without showing weakness, folded her hands in front of her chest and said coldly, "I don't need you to remind me. My business is none of your business. You'd better stay away from me." Scarlett's eyes were firm, like an unshakable wall, meeting Olivia's gaze directly. Olivia was angered by Scarlett's attitude, and the smile on her face disappeared instantly, replaced by a hint of viciousness. She took a step forward, stretched out her finger and almost poked Scarlett in the face. "Don't be too proud, you are just a fake. Don't you look at your own identity and dare to talk back to me." Scarlett slapped Olivia's hand away, stepped back, her face full of anger. "Don't go too far. I'm not a soft persimmon for you to bully." Scarlett's cheeks flushed slightly because of anger, and her breathing became rapid. She clenched her fists, ready to deal with Olivia's provocation at any time. The two were in a stalemate and Alex walked in. He was wearing a dark business suit today, wearing a simple yet textured tie, and the whole person exuded a cold aura. He looked at the two people who were on edge, frowned slightly, and revealed a hint of impatience in his eyes. "What are you arguing about? Be quiet." Olivia saw this and immediately put on a wronged look, her eyes slightly red and her voice was crying, "Brother Alex, look at her. Not only does she not admit her identity, but she is also fierce to me." As she said that, she also wiped the corners of her eyes with her hands in a hypocritical manner, as if she had really suffered a great injustice. Scarlett looked at Olivia's performance and her face turned red with anger. She pointed at Olivia and said loudly, "Don't pretend to be pitiful here. It was obviously you who came to cause trouble first." Scarlett's voice rose several octaves because of anger. She looked at Alex, hoping that he could distinguish right from wrong. Alex just looked at Scarlett coldly and said in a cold tone, "Enough, stop making trouble. From today on you have to play the role of Isabella well. If you cause any trouble again you will be in trouble." After that he turned and walked out of the room. The cold voice and resolute back made Scarlett feel desperate and angry. Scarlett stood there, clenched her fists tightly, her nails deeply embedded in her palms. She gritted her teeth, her eyes full of unwillingness and stubbornness. She secretly swore in her heart that she would never give in like this, and must find a way to get rid of this absurd situation and let Alex and Olivia know that she is not easy to bully. Since then, Alex always finds ways to make things difficult for Scarlett. That day he called Scarlett to the study. The study was filled with all kinds of books and antiques. Alex sat behind a large desk. When he saw Scarlett come in, he threw a stack of documents on the table. "Sort these out and give them to me before tonight." Scarlett glanced at the pile of messy documents that were half a person's height, then looked at Alex, her face flushed with anger, and she gritted her teeth and said, You are deliberately making things difficult for me. So many documents can't be finished in one night. Alex leaned back in the chair, crossed his legs, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. If you don't want to do it, just be obedient and be your substitute. Don't go against me again. Scarlett clenched her fists, her nails almost pinched into her palms. She took a deep breath and tried to keep herself calm. Dream on. I will never give in to you. After that, she turned around and slammed the door. Olivia was not idle either. She stepped on her high heels and came to Scarlett's room with a click. Olivia was wearing an exquisite floral dress and light makeup, looking sweet and harmless. But as soon as she spoke, her tone was full of sarcasm. Oh, you really take yourself seriously? You're just a fake. Scarlett looked at her coldly, her hands folded in front of her chest. What are you doing here? Go out if you have nothing to do. I don't want to see you. Olivia walked to the closet, picked up a piece of clothing and said casually, Isabella likes this dress very much. You look so funny in it. You are just imitating others. Scarlett walked up and snatched the clothes. Her eyes were full of anger. Don't be hypocritical here. If you have any tricks, just use them. I'm not afraid of you. Olivia covered her mouth and chuckled, but the laughter made people feel cold. Just wait and see, you will suffer. A few days later, Scarlett was falsely accused of stealing. Alex's eyes widened with anger and he strode to Scarlett and asked, Did you do it? Olivia said her expensive necklace was missing and she found it in your room. Scarlett's eyes were red with anxiety and her voice was trembling. I didn't steal it, it was Olivia who framed me. She has always disliked me, it must be her doing. Alex snorted coldly and crossed his arms. The evidence is irrefutable, but you are still quibbling. It seems that you will not be honest unless I teach you a lesson. Scarlett looked at Alex, extremely disappointed. How could you believe her so easily? You will regret it. Although Scarlett tried her best to defend herself, Alex didn't listen at all, turned around and left, leaving Scarlett alone in the room crying aggrievedly. Chapter 3: Difficulties in Starting a Business. After the conflict with Alex and Olivia came to an end, Scarlett knew that the only way to completely get rid of this absurd life of a substitute was to succeed in starting a business and achieve financial independence. Once this idea took root, it grew wildly in her heart. Scarlett began to do market research day and night. During the day, she shuttled through the streets and alleys of the city, observing people walking their pets, paying attention to how they cared for their pets, and listening to their needs and complaints when talking about their pets. At night, she returned to the luxurious room full of oppression, sat at the desk and pondered over the data and information on the computer screen. She carefully analyzed the market gaps, studied the strengths and weaknesses of competitors, and quickly tapped on the keyboard with her fingers, recording every inspiration and idea. After many days of hard work, a detailed business plan was finally born. Scarlett entered the door of her first investment company with this plan that condensed her hard work. She was received by a middle-aged investment manager who sat in a spacious and bright office. Behind him was a wall of bookshelves filled with various business books. Scarlett sat opposite him, leaning forward slightly with her hands folded on her knees, trying to make herself look calm. She took a deep breath and began to explain her project. Hello, I plan to build a high-end pet club that integrates pet grooming, training, and foster care. Nowadays, people's living standards have improved, and their investment in pets has increased. The market prospects are very broad. Her voice was clear and firm, and her eyes revealed confidence and expectation. The manager leaned back in his chair, crossed his hands on his chest and listened quietly. After Scarlett finished speaking, he frowned slightly and asked a series of sharp questions. Your project sounds good, but the pet industry is high risk and the customer base is unstable. What are your countermeasures? Moreover, you have no relevant industry experience. Why should we believe that you can succeed? Scarlett was well prepared. She answered calmly. In response to the problem of unstable customer base, I will launch a membership system, provide personalized services and enhance customer stickiness. As for industry experience, although I have not directly engaged in it, I have done a lot of research and have a deep understanding of the industry's pain points and needs. I believe that my business insight and efforts can make up for the lack of experience. Although Scarlett answered clearly, the manager finally shook his head. I'm sorry, we still think the risk is too high and we can't invest for the time being. Scarlett's heart sank suddenly, but she still forced a smile and said politely, "It's okay, thank you for taking the time to listen to my introduction." She stood up, sorted out the documents, turned around and left the office. Walking out of the building, she looked at the bustling streets, took a deep breath and encouraged herself. This is just the first one, there is still a chance. However, in the following days, rejections came like a tide. One after another, investment companies rejected her for various reasons. Some said that the market competition was too fierce, and some questioned her business model. Scarlett felt exhausted, but she did not give up. Finally, after countless setbacks, a small investment institution showed interest in her project. After several rounds of difficult negotiations, the two sides finally reached a cooperation intention. Scarlett was full of joy, thinking that the road to entrepreneurship had finally ushered in the dawn. But just when the project was about to start, the other party suddenly regretted it. The moment Scarlett received the call, she felt like she was struck by lightning. She immediately rushed to the other party's company, pushed open the door and saw the person in charge sitting at the desk looking embarrassed. "Why did you change your mind suddenly? Didn't we talk about it before?" Scarlett's voice trembled a little and she stared at the other party, her eyes full of anger and unwillingness. The other party didn't dare to look her in the eye, lowered his head and stammered, "Yes. I'm sorry, someone put pressure on me, I really can't do anything." Scarlett was so angry that she trembled all over, holding the edge of the table tightly with both hands. "How can you do this? We agreed to start a business together, but now you are running away at the last minute. You are so irresponsible." Her voice echoed in the office, but the other party just sighed helplessly without any response. Misfortunes never come alone. After learning about her predicament, competitors began to spread rumors everywhere, saying that her project was a scam and could not be implemented at all. Scarlett could hear people pointing fingers at her when she walked on the street. Faced with these successive blows, Scarlett hid in her small temporary residence and cried loudly. Tears slid down her cheeks and wet her clothes. But after crying, she wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and her eyes became firm again. "I will not be defeated, I will definitely succeed." She cheered up again, continued to look for investment opportunities, and worked hard for her entrepreneurial dream. Chapter 4: Emotional Undercurrents, a Triangle Puzzle. During the busy days of starting a business, the relationship between Scarlett and Alex has quietly changed. One late night when she was working overtime, the only sound in the office was the clacking of Scarlett's keyboard. After an unknown amount of time, her head became heavier and heavier, and she fell asleep on the table without realizing it. Alex walked into the office to find a project document, and the moment he saw Scarlett, his steps suddenly stopped. He stood quietly at the door, his eyes slowly swept across Scarlett's tired face, and his eyes softened unconsciously. After a while, Alex walked lightly to the hanger, took off his coat and gently covered Scarlett with it. Scarlett moved in her sleep, woke up in a daze, saw her coat and saw Alex standing beside her and was stunned. "Why are you here?" There was still a hoarseness in her voice from just waking up. Alex turned his head away uncomfortably and cleared his throat. "I'll get the documents. I see you fell asleep. Don't catch a cold and delay your work." After that, he walked quickly to the file cabinet and started looking. Scarlett's mouth corners slightly raised and she whispered, "Thank you, I didn't expect you to be so careful." Alex paused for a moment while holding the document without looking back and whispered, "Nothing." After that, he hurried away with the document and deliberately made a light move when closing the door. Since then, there has been a subtle change in the relationship between the two. Alex no longer makes things difficult for Scarlett everywhere, and occasionally he would care about her a few words. Once, Scarlett missed the meal due to a busy project. Alex passed by and frowned and said, "Eat first. No matter how important the work is, you can't go hungry." The tone was tough and could not be refused. Scarlett looked at him and a warm feeling surged in her heart and she nodded. At this moment, Hudson, a handsome and wealthy pet supplies supplier, appeared. Hudson has fluffy blonde hair and two deep dimples when he smiles, which makes him very friendly. The first time he met Scarlett, he was attracted by her tenacity and independence. Hudson often asks Scarlett out, sometimes in a cozy cafe, sometimes in a lively art exhibition. On this day they were in an open-air restaurant, surrounded by people coming and going, and it was very lively. Hudson smiled and handed the menu to Scarlett. "The pasta in this restaurant is very good, try the meat sauce flavor." Scarlett responded with a polite smile. "Thank you, it looks delicious." During the meal the two chatted happily. Hudson vividly recounted his travel experiences around the world. The interesting stories and unique experiences made Scarlett laugh from time to time, and her eyes were full of curiosity and yearning. When Alex learned about it, his face suddenly darkened. Once, in the company corridor, Alex saw Scarlett chatting with Hudson. His eyes suddenly sharp, strode over and pulled Scarlett over. "Follow me." The voice was low and with obvious anger. Scarlett struggled. "What are you doing? Let me go." She shook her arms vigorously, trying to break free from Alex's hand. Alex didn't say anything, pulled her into the office, put his hands on the table, stared at her and asked in a questioning tone, "Why are you so close to him? He is not a good person." His eyes were locked on Scarlett as if he wanted to find the answer from her. Scarlett put her hands on her hips and asked back, "Who I date is none of your business? What right do you have to interfere in my life?" She looked back at Alex without flinching, her eyes full of dissatisfaction. Alex was speechless for a moment, and after a long time he said, "Anyway, stay away from him, I'm doing this for your own good." His voice went down, but his eyes were full of worry. Scarlett looked at him, confused and angry. "Don't mind my business, I have my own judgment." After that he turned and left the office, leaving Alex standing alone, frowning, his eyes full of complex emotions. Chapter 5. The conspiracy is exposed and the desperate counterattack. Olivia saw that Scarlett was going smoothly in her career and her relationship with Alex was getting deeper and deeper. Jealousy bit her heart like a poisonous snake. She colluded with Alex's business rival in secret. In the dim room, the two of them put their heads together and whispered a vicious plan. Every word was full of calculation and malice. Not long after, disaster struck Scarlett's pet club. In the early morning, when the employees just opened the door of the store, a pungent smell hit them. The store was in a mess. The pets curled up weakly in the corner, making bursts of wailing. After receiving the news, Scarlett was anxious and trotted all the way to the club. Seeing the scene in front of her, her head buzzed, and she was stunned. Her legs were weak and she almost couldn't stand. Then angry pet owners rushed in and surrounded the club. They were emotional, some slapped the front desk hard and shouted loudly, "How do you take care of pets? My baby is so sick." Some had red eyes, hugged sick pets and asked in a trembling voice, "You must give me an explanation." Scarlett stood in the crowd, constantly explaining and comforting, her voice was hoarse. "Everyone calm down first, we will definitely take responsibility to the end, bear all the treatment costs and give everyone a satisfactory answer." However, her voice was soon drowned by the angry voice. When Alex arrived, his face was so gloomy that it seemed like water could drip out. He strode to Scarlett, his brows twisted into a Tuan character, and asked, "Scarlett, what are you doing? Such a big thing, how did you deal with it?" His eyes were full of disappointment and anger, and his voice was particularly low because of anger. Scarlett looked at him, her eyes instantly red, grievances and unwillingness surged in her heart. "I have been trying to solve it. This is obviously someone deliberately framed, why don't you believe me?" Her voice trembled slightly and she was extremely disappointed with Alex's distrust. Olivia was secretly proud of herself, wiping her tears hypocritically. "Sister, just admit it, it must be your poor management that caused this." She had false sympathy on her face, but her eyes were flashing with gloating. Scarlett glared at her fiercely, gritted her teeth and said, "Don't be too proud too early, I will definitely find evidence to make the truth clear." After that she turned and walked into the office, closed the door and began to collect evidence everywhere. In the following days, Scarlett was like a clockwork, checking the surveillance video day and night, carefully identifying it frame by frame. Her eyes were full of bloodshot and dark circles. She also visited the surrounding merchants in person, asking door to door, not missing any details. Finally, outside an abandoned warehouse, she heard a conversation between Olivia and her business rival, talking about the plan to frame her. Scarlett's heart suddenly tightened. She quietly approached, took out her mobile phone and pressed the recording button. After getting the evidence, Scarlett straightened her back and walked into the press conference. The flashlights kept flashing and reporters asked questions one after another. Scarlett took a deep breath and walked steadily to the podium of the press conference. Under the stage, dozens of eyes were staring at her, and the flashlights kept flashing like a tide, which hurt her eyes. The recorders and cameras in the hands of the reporters were all aimed at her, and the atmosphere at the scene was as tense as a fully drawn bowstring. "Dear media friends," Scarlett said, her voice trembling slightly due to nervousness, but she quickly stabilized. "Today, I want to reveal a conspiracy to everyone." There was a commotion under the stage, and reporters whispered to each other and took notes in their notebooks. At this time, a male reporter wearing black-framed glasses in the crowd raised his hand and asked, "Miss Scarlett, you claim that this is a conspiracy. Do you have any evidence?" Scarlett did not answer immediately but looked at the staff and nodded. The lights at the scene dimmed, and the audio she secretly recorded began to play on the big screen. The voices of Olivia and her business rivals echoed in the venue, and every word was like a heavy hammer hitting everyone's eardrums. When the recording ended, the whole audience was in an uproar. Reporters stood up and surrounded Scarlett, asking questions like a barrage of bullets. "How did you discover this conspiracy? Why did Olivia do this?" Scarlett tried to stay calm and answered the questions one by one. At this time, a female reporter in the corner asked loudly, "Miss Scarlett, this incident has caused a huge blow to your pet club. How do you plan to save the situation?" Scarlett looked at the audience with a firm look. "I will be responsible for all the affected pets and customers. Next, we will fully upgrade our services and security measures and win back everyone's trust with practical actions." After the press conference, Scarlett walked out of the venue with the sun shining on her face. Although she was tired, her eyes showed the relief of surviving the disaster and her expectations for the future. When Olivia heard that Scarlett had disclosed the evidence at the press conference, her face turned pale as paper, her legs softened, and she collapsed to the ground with a plop. She never thought that Scarlett could actually find evidence, and her painstakingly planned conspiracy was so easily exposed. Soon the police came and took Olivia away. After an investigation, the evidence was conclusive and she regretted it, but it was too late. Now she had to pay the price for what she had done. Chapter 6: Misunderstandings are cleared, and a happy ending. After the truth came out, Alex was full of regret and his heart was filled with guilt. He knew that his suspicion and distrust at the beginning were like a sharp blade that hurt Scarlett badly. In order to seek Scarlett's forgiveness, he rushed to her residence anxiously and knocked on the door, and every knock was so heavy that it seemed to knock on his heart. The door slowly opened and Scarlett saw Alex. Her eyes dimmed instantly, and she subconsciously wanted to close the door. Alex was quick-witted and quickly stretched out his hand to block the door, and said in an urgent and pleading tone, "Scarlett, don't close the door. I'm here to apologize to you." His voice was a little hoarse because of anxiety and self-blame, and his eyes were full of guilt. Scarlett stopped closing the door and looked at him coldly, her voice full of disappointment and grievance. "If apologies are useful, what do we need the police for? Can an apology make up for the grievances I have suffered during this period?" Her eyes were deeply alienated, as if there was an insurmountable gap between the two of them. Alex lowered his head, not daring to look directly into Scarlett's eyes. His voice was muffled and full of regret. "I know I was wrong. I have been reflecting on myself during this period. I was too confused and did not choose to believe you. I will accept whatever you say as long as you can forgive me." As he said that, he took out a delicate little box from his pocket and handed it to Scarlett. "This is a gift I prepared for you. I hope you can accept it." Scarlett did not take it. She looked at Alex, her eyes gradually turned red, and those painful memories surged into her heart like a tide. She remembered that when she just crossed over, Alex coldly asked her to be a substitute, with that cold eyes and unquestionable tone. She remembered that when Olivia framed her for stealing, Alex questioned her angrily and did not listen to her explanation at all. She remembered that the pet club encountered a crisis and she tried her best to save it, but Alex questioned her with an angry face. These things, one by one, every experience made her feel extremely desperate and painful. "Do you know how I survived these days? Everyone blames me and you don't trust me. I'm really desperate." Scarlett's voice trembled slightly and tears rolled in her eyes, ready to burst out at any time. Alex stepped forward and gently hugged Scarlett tightly as if he was afraid that she would leave again. "I won't do that again in the future. I promise that no matter what happens, I will stand firmly by your side and help you face all difficulties together." His tone was very firm, as if he was promising Scarlett, and as if he was swearing to himself. Scarlet struggled in his arms for a while, but finally slowly relaxed and sobbed softly, "I hope you will do what you say." She was still a little hesitant in her heart. Although Alex's apology and promise moved her a little, those injuries could not be easily erased. However, looking at Alex's sincere look, she decided to give him another chance and give herself a chance to start over. With the help of Alex, the pet club was renovated and opened. They discussed new business strategies together, and Alex, with his business connections, brought many high-quality customers to the club. On the opening day, Scarlet stood at the door, looking at the lively scene with a happy smile on her face. Days passed in an orderly manner, and Scarlet devoted herself to the operation of the pet club. With her excellent business acumen and unremitting efforts, the club's business became more and more prosperous, and she became famous in the industry and her career was thriving. At the same time, after experiencing all kinds of twists and turns, she and Alex became more and more emotional. The two understood and supported each other and were inseparable. On a breezy evening, the sky was dyed orange-red by the sunset, beautiful as a dream. Alex took Scarlet's hand and strolled to the garden of the luxurious apartment where they first met. In the garden, the flowers and plants swayed gently in the breeze, exuding a faint fragrance. Alex stopped, turned around and looked at Scarlet tenderly. The afterglow of the sunset sprinkled on the two of them, outlining a layer of golden outlines for them. Alex took a deep breath, suddenly knelt on one knee, took out a delicate little box from his pocket, opened it, and a dazzling ring came into view. The diamond sparkled in the afterglow. He looked sincere and said affectionately, "Scarlet, since you appeared in my life, everything has changed. I love you. Will you marry me and let me protect you for the rest of my life?" Scarlet looked at Alex in front of her. Her eyes were instantly wet and tears flashed in her eyes. The bits and pieces of the past flashed quickly in her mind. There were quarrels, misunderstandings, and countless warm moments of mutual companionship. She nodded vigorously, her voice was crying but very firm, "I do." Alex's face bloomed with a bright smile. He stood up, gently put the ring on Scarlet's finger and then hugged her tightly. Under this romantic sunset, the two hugged each other tightly as if time had stopped for them, leaving only this eternal beauty. The wedding was held in a picturesque manner, with the sun pouring down through the clear blue sky, covering the entire manor with a layer of golden tulle. The lawn of the manor was neatly trimmed, surrounded by delicate and beautiful flowers, and the rich fragrance of flowers filled the air. Scarlet wore a white floor-length wedding dress, simple yet elegant, and the delicate lace outlined her slender waist. She held a bouquet of roses and lilies in her hand and walked lightly to the end of the red carpet. Her face was filled with a happy smile, as beautiful as a princess from a fairy tale. Alex wore a neat black suit. His hair was meticulously groomed, handsome and graceful. He stood at the end of the red carpet, his eyes always closely following Scarlet, his eyes full of affection and expectation. When Scarlet came to him, he gently took her hand and the two slowly walked towards the pastor. The pastor smiled and began to preside over the ceremony. Witnessed by everyone, Alex slightly turned sideways, facing Scarlet, holding her hand tightly, and said in a firm and affectionate voice, "In the future, no matter what happens, I will be by your side." His eyes were locked in Scarlet's eyes, as if promising her a lifetime of protection. Scarlet's eyes were shining with tears. Those were tears of happiness. She looked up at Alex and responded softly but forcefully, "I will always be by your side." Her words were like a gentle breeze, but full of unwavering determination. Then they exchanged rings and the rings sparkled in the sun, symbolizing their eternal love. Friends and relatives applauded and sent their most sincere blessings, and applause and cheers came one after another. The two held hands and slowly exited along the red carpet, heading towards a new life. Their figures appear particularly happy under the sunshine, as if telling us that in the days ahead, no matter what the weather, they will go hand in hand to welcome a happy future together.